Hi, I am Zubin Rashid. Welcome to Leadership in HR. Today we have with us Mr. Vikram Sharma from Tata Motors. He has more than 2 decades of experience in the field of human resources. Let us welcome Mr. Sharma. Welcome Vikram to our show.
Hi, thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Thank you so much, and we would really like to know about you first before we move into discussing certain aspects of human resources. So we would like to know about you from the perspective of your work, as well as a little bit about you as a person.
Okay. I'm an HR professional with very rich and varied experience across certain industry domains, especially telecom, automobile and life sciences, and primarily in the manufacturing sector. I have been an HR business partner, and that is what I love doing, and I play across the entire gamut of HR functions. Right. And currently I lead the human resources for the sales and marketing vertical for passenger vehicle division of Tata Motors, and personally I have done my master's specialization in human resources. I love to engage myself in community development, and I got a chance in 2008 to be very actively engaged with United Nations World Food Program.
Okay.
Wherein I did a pro bono assignment for UN and went with a team to Zambia on a mission to study how the school feeding program of WFP was helping mitigate the twin problems of hunger and malnutrition. Besides that, I love calisthenics, which is light exercises to make you stay fit and healthy. And I like reading various subjects, but mostly on non-fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you like to read in non-fiction?
Mostly articles on management after, passing out from B schools. But before that, a little bit of fiction also, which I have read, is primarily of certain literary classics like W. Somerset Maugham, Albert Camus, and the like, and that's from the literary classics in English literature. Besides that, management gurus like Tom Peters, quality gurus, and we have Daniel Goleman, Marshall Goldsmith, so and various other venerated authors from the Harvard Business Review and other such.
Wow, so I think that's a pretty big area to cover, isn't it? There's so many different aspects. So you love reading.
Right.
Okay, great. So let us get into the subject that we would like to discuss today. So when we're talking about practicing value-based and ethical behavior, and I would like to ask you your views on why do you think this is important for HR professionals to begin with?
See, I believe it's true for HR professionals to espouse value-based practices and ethical behavior in management. But I also feel and cogently feel that it's not only the HR managers or leaders, but it is the business leaders who need to espouse ethical behavior, integrity, and walk the talk. Otherwise, what happens is that it is just a matter of time when the people whom you lead, they take you across as somebody who's a hypocrite and who doesn't mean what one says.
Yeah.
So for you to have to be an inspirational leader, and it's very important that people perceive you very transparent in your decision making. Whatever decisions that we take are based on fair play and not with a selfish motive, and that is also eventually turns out good for the business as well, for
Right.
sustainable business.
If I look at your career or your work that you've been doing over the past couple of decades, as you said, have you ever faced a situation where you were challenged, from using the value-based and ethical behavior, but you stuck to it and you actually ensured that you practiced the value-based and ethical behavior and you came out successful?
Yeah, so all through, if I quote certain instances, we being in a field where there is always opportunities or instances when there are elements of ethical dilemma. Yeah, and to quote one instance is also because we are also the so-called conscious keepers of the overall framework of the policies guidelines. So in case if you're working for an organization which has a very well documented whistleblower policy, and if there is a complaint that is lodged against a certain malpractice or a certain practice that is not being perceived in the right spirit of the organizational cultural and values, then usually it is either the internal audit or an ethics counselor, as in Tata Motors we have it, or it is also the HR professional who is entrusted with the task of finding it out, analyzing it, scrutinizing, and just also doing the consequence management. So all through my life, whether in this organization or in previous, I have at times been involved in places, in opportunities wherein there was some colleague or some employee who had not followed the laid down practice, and then there was a complaint, and then one had to take the necessary action. Also, when I joined Honda Motorcycles in 2001, at that time I came to know that head of information communication technology, ICT, was asked to leave only on the reason that in his travel bills there was instance which was later found out by the investigating team, that there was a misappropriation.
Right.
Similarly, in my recent role a year back in one of our international operations, we found, and there was a complaint by the internal audit that there seems to be an incidence wherein an employee is fudging the bills and taking wrong fuel reimbursements, etc.
Right.
And we found out, and the employee was guilty, and natural consequence of the separation, and we do not relent. For example, I believe that when it comes to integrity, most of the companies have it enshrined as part of their cultural or values, etc.
True.
But it is also how you live up to it, and you have to have the management buy in, the top leadership to see to it that what message it then sends across, because it's not that the person who is indulging in any of these activities is doing it in solitude and others are not aware of it.
Right.
And when any appropriate action is taken, then also the silent message that flows across the organization is also very important, that stands by its values, and it does not compromises with the ethical behavior in any way.
So when you're talking about this aspect of value-based and ethical behavior, and since you're working with Tata Motors, now what I have read when I was studying management, or whenever I go through certain case studies and the word Tata comes in, the first thing that hits my mind, even now, is about practicing value-based and ethical behavior. So what have you seen in your organization? How is this being carried forward? How is this being percolated across different levels? Because you gave an example of fudging bills, for example. Yeah. So I mean, this is where it starts. It's at the basic level. Fudging bills, well, you might just get a little bit of money, but what does that do to your reputation? What does that do to who you are? your conscience. So I feel, I have read so much, I've heard so much about the Tata way of doing things. So would love to know about your experience in Tata Motors on this.
So value-based culture is a very basic DNA of the Tata Group, whether it is Tata Motors or any other company which is part of the Tata Group. And the very foundation on which the whole empire of Tata is based is on, integrity and ethics. In Tatas, we have a Tata Code of Conduct.
Yes.
Which has certain clauses and which are also meant for the employees, for various other stakeholders. So there are very well-defined framework of orientation programs across the group companies, wherein any new employee and even the existing employees are initiated into the Tata way of working. And so for example, a new employee joins in, so within a certain defined period, he or she has to necessarily undergo an online training program on Tata Code of Conduct. And it's a certification program, and you get certified that you have completely understood that program. Then various other programs by an agency, internal audit are carried out. For any reported incidences also, in case if one is one feels that any particular employee at any level is not following the Tata Code of Conduct, so there is a very well defined documented process of reporting the incidents, and then there is a very thorough investigation that happens. And what previous example I gave was a very simple example. There have been instances at a very senior level as well, where any such kind of deviation from the code is not entertained, right? And people have just been asked to go, but they do it in a very typical Tata manner. They don't make hullabaloo about it, but at the same time there is no compromise on that. At the same time, when I say this Tata Code of Conduct, there are very, very well defined guidelines for an employee on how to conduct. So for example, if an employee is interfacing with the external stakeholders, be it the vendors or the dealers. So in festive occasions, for instance, if I was to quote an example, the case in point is how much amount of any gift one would receive, which will be construed as an acceptable behavior, and what will not is very well documented there.
True. Yeah.
Right. And earlier question also, Subin, that you asked was that as an HR professional, so whether an HR professional or in any other function also, there are instances when you deal with an external vendor, wherein in case if you are the authorizing person or a person accountable to take a decision, right, then there is a likelihood of you being influenced by the vendor in some manner. Right. And sorry to kind of jump to your earlier question and kind of elucidate this here, but in Tata's, what I have seen last 6 years, more than 6 years I've been here, that this code of conduct is very, very cardinal, is very well respected, and is followed to in letter and spirit. And of course, I mentioned about the whistleblower policy, and that there are separate functional departments. We have ethics counselors, regional counselors, function level counselors. People are made aware that in case of any such practice or malpractice, whom to be contacted. Sometimes there are anonymous complaints, sometimes people come forward. So I think that also sends a signal to every employee that this is a safe working place. There is a mutual respect. And of course, for any kind of a deviation, to the acceptable behavior, there are rules laid down and which are followed.
Right. So now I'm just trying to move out of this subject of discussion and move to a fun segment of our program, which is called a rapid fire round.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions and you'll not get much time to think, you just need to give me an answer. So are you ready?
Yeah, please.
Excellent. What is your favorite color of tie?
Blue.
Blue. Okay. Is it a favorite color otherwise as well in general?
I have always loved this blue color because while growing up, whether it was a boy in shorts and later on in the teens in blue jeans, or later on in formals as blue blazer in college, and later on this color blue, and so I have
has
a
been
matching
part of
tie.
life.
Yeah. I have a matching tie also of that color.
Okay.
Incidentally, it's that I'm wearing the same color today. But then,
wow.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite restaurant in Mumbai?
There is a restaurant in Powai which wherein the waiters are differently abled people.
Okay.
Yeah, it has caught my fancy because of the uniqueness of this restaurant to engage and employ those people who may not otherwise be considered as a regular section of the society, and they would find difficulty. So they are deaf and dumb people who would be serving you, and it's a very different experience to go and serve there.
Okay. What would you prefer, the hills or the sea?
The hills.
And why?
The mountains and the overall ambience of the hills has a certain kind of serenity, and the mountains also give me a feeling that the prayers go up and the blessings come down. So if I kind of correlate it with this kind of analogy, it is also a natural habitat for the various flora and fauna, and you feel one with the nature. And it's not like with the sea one would not, but sea to me is also about stillness. It's also about vastness, etc. But between the two, I would prefer hills.
Okay, great. I think you've given me great answers in the rapid fire round, and the logic behind your answer is something that I really loved listening to.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for these answers. But I would like to move into the final segment of our discussion, which is something very beneficial for our audience as well, beyond all the discussions we've had, is what would be your suggestion or suggestions to our audience? And you would have a lot of young HR professionals who are watching this particular interview. What would be your suggestion to them on how they can prepare themselves to be able to practice value-based and ethical behavior in the workplace?
Okay, this is, I feel and sincerely feel that this is not something one can learn from textbooks. So as HR professionals, or as generally professionals, we work for our gainful engagement. What we need to do is that on the touchstone of our conscious call, we always need to weigh every decision of ours. So whether a person is in operations, supply chain, sales, marketing, there will be times and opportunities when there will be calls to kind of tilt your balance, right? But in case if we are true to our calling, the what we call as the inner spirit, and we hear and we practice to hear that conscience call, I think one should not give in for very transitory tinsel attractions which could be very short-lived, because it is your reputation, it is with what you live by. You may not get caught one time, twice or thrice, but this is also your inner conscience which will prick you. So my advice to all professionals, young or old and working, would be that one should restrain from any kind of instances which would come in any professional settings, and be true to your own self. That is it. It's not that one is answerable to any manager, or one would get caught or not get caught, but what is it that would give you a peaceful sleep at the night?
Okay. I think spoken like a true Tata person as well, and I understand that probably that's something that you really follow in your own life.
Yes.
And that's great advice, and I think if people can follow this advice, they would be able to create a great image and reputation, and most importantly, I think when you spoke about conscience, they can live a guilt-free life.
Exactly, that is what I meant. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Vikram, I must thank you for sharing such great insights on our subject of discussion, and it was great having you here in our program.
Thank you very much.
So we were speaking to Vikram from Tata Motors, and we learned a lot about this subject, and I think we got some great insights also about the organization, about the Tata Group and the way they follow these value-based and ethical behaviors. So if you've liked what you have seen, if you've learned something, please do like and share this video, and until next time, goodbye.